Not all postdocs are the same. Even within the same project, there are varying types of postdoc position that may not be obvious when you apply. For example, I was in a project with probably about 4 other postdocs, and I found out eventually that it was my job to also kind of get the data and information from the other postdocs and include it into the KPI, like form and progress reports, and put together everyone's data so that I can present it sort of like on behalf of all of the other postdocs. And what happened was my postdoc actually became more like a project management role rather than fully research, whereas the other postdocs on the project, they were just doing their own research and presenting their own stuff. But maybe it was because I was more keen, maybe it was because I was a little bit sort of further into my postdoc career, that I was now doing more of a project management sort of component to my postdoc, whilst the other people could kind of focus on the research. And so even within the same project, and you're applying for the same postdoc positions, there will be tasks and jobs that are handed out differently to different postdocs. So one of the biggest regrets that I have is actually just not really understanding, like, what type of postdoc am I? Am I a postdoc that is free to do stuff in the lab? Am I a postdoc that's really focused on the project management stuff? A lot of the time I find that the job applications don't actually tell you what you're doing as a postdoc. It's not until afterwards when you get there, they go, oh, and also all of this is your job as well. And so it can be relatively frustrating, especially if you're the sort of postdoc that wants to build up their own career. You know, you got to do your own research and stuff on the side. If you want to escape the postdoc trap, go check out my other video here. By becoming an academic, you have to find time to do your own research and apply for your own grant money. And if you're the sort of postdoc that's doing all of the admin stuff and the project management stuff as well, there's going to be much less time for that. That's frustrating. So you got to work out where you fit in the postdoc hierarchy underneath the principal investigator and see if that actually matches with what you want to do with your career. Another big postdoc regret, I think, is not realizing that this is the last opportunity you have to do the research. A lot of people end up doing postdocs and PhDs because they love doing the actual research. They're in the lab stuff. There are 2 ways out of a postdoc: to leave academia altogether, or to sort of like go up the academic career ladder and become an academic. Both of them mean you're no longer doing independent research. Obviously, leaving academia altogether is obvious, but when you become like an academic in your own right, that is when you now facilitate other people doing the work. Facilitating by getting money, facilitating by providing resources, by providing lab space, by providing guidance. You no longer actually just do the research. So I think one of my biggest PhD or postdoc, regrets is that I didn't actually just acknowledge that this is what I do actually like doing, which is the research stuff. And then once you start trying to build up your career, it's all mainly admin and facilitation, which is way more boring. Another big regret that I think a lot of postdocs go through is that they don't hit the ground running. This now, a postdoc, is now the beginning of the real race. Your real race to an academic position, to getting a job in a university, if that's what you want to do. But a lot of people, I think, they get out of their PhD and they're newly minted doctors and they feel like they've got 6 months, maybe even a little bit more, like to relax and be like, let's cruise into this. And the same thing happens at the beginning of a PhD, in fact. And then we scramble towards the later stages because we haven't put enough effort in early on. If you don't hit the ground running by publishing papers, applying for grant money, trying to sort of like make your own academic career work, then you are really left behind. The early stages of your postdoc is where you really need to sort of hit the ground running. And even though you've got this kind of like this feeling that you want to relax because you've done all the hard work to get there, it's really where I think it separates sort of like the really determined from the people that are just cruising into their next career. And so yeah, hitting the ground running, I feel like I didn't use the best years of my postdoc, i.e. the first 2 to 3 years to really further my career. Rather, I just felt like it was more like a job, which it should be, but that's just not the academic system at the moment. So just have to go in and really sort of be hungry for that success if you want an academic career. And maybe I just wasn't hungry enough for it, and that's also okay, and it's why I ended up leaving. But yeah, if you do really want to get a professorship or you want to work in a university, it is time to work hard from the get-go. I think a lot of people regret not working harder earlier. I certainly feel like there's like a sense of desperation when you're applying for different postdocs. Essentially, I applied for as many postdocs as I could, and I accepted the first one that said yes. And maybe I shouldn't have, because the labs I went into weren't necessarily the publication sort of powerhouses I needed them to be. I didn't vet the groups I was going into enough out of desperation. And I don't really know how you overcome that desperation stage, because that's just the situation we find ourselves in. But ultimately, what I had to do was get a job. I needed to live and have money. But if you want an academic career, you have to be very committed and serious about what group you are going into. Look at their publication record. If the lead investigator hasn't published a lot recently, it's going to be a very hard postdoc for you. You want to make sure that you're also sort of swept up in the momentum of their publishing record. If there's no momentum, there's no momentum for you either. And so, you know, they're employing people because they want to get the momentum up. But ultimately, if you can, you need to be incredibly picky with the groups you end up going into, because you want to immediately get into their group and then have opportunities to get on to papers that they are producing in their lab. If you don't, you can end up wasting a number of years trying to build up the momentum that they haven't been able to do for themselves. You really have to be really diligent about understanding their current successes, because you want to be part of that. If there's nothing obvious and you want to get into an academic position, it's probably best to wait for that next opportunity and say no. Another big regret is not applying for money early enough. As soon as you start your postdoc position, you should be applying for grants. If you're not applying for grants early on, it means that you're really going to struggle later on. You need to make sure that you have enough time to fail at grants multiple times before one finally lands in your pocket. And the only way you do that is start writing. So if you're not writing grants in the first sort of 1 or 2 months of your postdoc, then you probably need to start doing that, because it's going to be incredibly difficult. And I certainly didn't do it enough. So apply for every grant you can possibly apply for. It's annoying. You've got tools now like ChatGPT. Go check out my other video where I talk about how you can use that kind of AI for being more persuasive in your grant applications. But that's pretty much the only tools you have at the moment to make sure that your application is as strong as possible. So you really only learn about writing grants by writing grants and getting feedback. So start writing, start failing, start getting that feedback, and eventually you'll slowly sort of like start figuring out what works and what doesn't. And that does take a number of years. So start writing early. So there we have it. There are the top postdoc regrets that I think most people have. Let me know in the comments what you would add and if you agree or disagree with any of them. Also, there are more ways you can get in contact with me. There are 2 particular good ways. The first way is to sign up to my newsletter, where you'll get 5 emails over about 2 weeks, everything from the tools I use, the podcasts I've been on, and more. The second way is to go on to academiainsider.com. That's my new project where I've got my ebooks, the Ultimate Academic Writing Toolkit, as well as the PhD Survival Guide, and I'll see you over there. All right then, I'll see you in the next video.